My guest at this time is syndicated columnist Deroy Murdock. You can find the vast majority of his writings at National Review online. He joins me now to explain why he thinks President Trump could actually have tremendous leverage in the fight for $5 billion in border wall funding, if he's willing to use that leverage. And Deroy, thanks so much for being with us.
Great to be with you.
What is Trump's leverage, and how could he use it to get wall funding?
I would say he should come out this afternoon or at the soonest available opportunity and come out and basically say no wall, no farm bill. He has sitting on his desk the so-called Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018. It's an 801-page bill passed by Congress, and it contains $867 billion over 10 years in farm subsidies and also even including brand new subsidies for barley, for hops, for hemp, ridiculous nonsense we don't need, and also food stamp money. And the food stamp money used to have work requirements, which basically said if you want to get food stamps, you've got to work or take classes or do something to get yourself out of poverty. Those work requirements have been weakened, if not removed, and now basically people can get food stamps and sit back, get their food stamps, and relax and not actually have to work for their benefits. So this is welfare unreform. I really think this bill ought to be vetoed on principle, but if it must be signed, if I were President Trump, I'd say, look, Democrats, you guys want to give people food stamps without work requirements? Great. You give me money for the wall, I'll sign this bill. You don't give me money for the wall, I veto this bill, and throw that right back in their faces. And I think that's the most leverage he's got right now, and it might be something where they finally say, all right, fine, we get what we want, you get what we want, and we both walk away happy.
And the Farm Bill is obviously a high priority for lawmakers, not only in farm states, but in other states as well, because as you mentioned, there are other things in there than just agricultural subsidies. But here's the one potential hiccup that I discovered, Deroy. The Farm Bill has already passed the House and Senate by pretty lopsided margins. It was 87-13 in the Senate and 369-47 in the House, which are beyond the two-thirds majorities needed to override any potential veto. So how does he still have the leverage if the members of both parties have the votes to knock it down?
Well, that's a good point. I think he'd have to do two things. One is use the bully pulpit, and secondly, essentially say to the Republicans, look, this is our last chance to get wall funding. They're talking about now, Mitch McConnell is saying we need to do a continuing resolution through February, and then we'll revisit the wall. President Trump will have much better luck squeezing champagne out of a cinder block than getting wall money out of Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and folks like that. The next Congress is going to be even more difficult and intransigent. They'll be focused on impeachment rather than trying to give President Trump any of his priorities. So this is, I think, the last chance for the wall, at least for the next 2 years, and he ought to take advantage of that and tell the Republicans, look, this is what we ran on, this is what the American people voted to have, and if we don't get this thing now, it's not going to happen. And good luck trying to get reelected in 2020 with the GOP base just completely demoralized and upset.
You bring
deservedly so.
You bring up a really important point there, because Trump keeps complaining about Democrats who clearly have no interest in building a wall, and they are certainly an obstacle. But the truth here is there are a number of Republicans who want nothing to do with this, as well as evidenced by the House defeating a pretty tough immigration reform bill quite easily this year that was sponsored by the House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte. And Mitch McConnell, as you just mentioned, is already pitching a stopgap bill with no wall funding that would take us to February when the Democrats will be running the House. So why are there so many Republicans who don't want this fight?
I think a lot of it is two things. One is Republicans are incredibly weak, and the other is they're incredibly scared. And Republicans basically seem to be terrified. They're upset that the so-called paper of record is going to criticize them, or CNN might attack them. They'll say, oh, my God, we'll be attacked by the media. They're attacked by the media from when they wake up in the morning until they go to sleep at night. So Republicans need to get over that, understand and accept and stipulate that they'll be attacked by the media and go on with their damn business. That's the first thing. The second is that you do have some folks in the Republican caucus who believe in much more kind of open immigration. Maybe they believe that lower labor costs help business. I think that actually weakens things for American workers in this country. We want to be focused on what they need rather than what people overseas need. And I think one huge opportunity that the White House and others on the right have missed on this is to focus on the national security aspect of why the wall is necessary. We talk a lot about the caravan and people from Latin America coming up here, and that's all important. But we have people coming across the U.S. Mexican border who get arrested, who come from such wonderful places as Iran, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, and I hope that they're coming here just to work hard and enjoy the American dream, and probably most of them are. But all you need is, as we saw on September 11th, 19 bad guys to wipe out 3,000 Americans. And I'm not at all comfortable as an American, actually on vacation now, visiting my parents about an hour above the U.S. Mexican border here in Southern California, knowing that people who are coming across, who are not just coming from Honduras and Guatemala, but coming from nations that actually are on the State Department's list of state sponsors of terrorism. We ought to talk about that. That's a very, very important argument that the White House and Republicans ought to make. And it also avoids the counter-argument that we often hear from the left, which is, well, you just hate Hispanics, you just hate Mexicans, it's just racism, et cetera. It's a matter of national security, and I don't want people coming across from Iran, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, et cetera, who we've not vetted. We don't know if their intentions are good or ill, if they want to help build this country, if they want to kill Americans. And putting a border wall there keeps them from coming in and, God forbid, plotting or actually effectively killing Americans, which I think too many people from that part of the world are interested in doing.
And before anybody starts throwing xenophobe labels at Deroy, his parents are immigrants. So
That's right. My mother and father came from Costa Rica. And by the way, when they came from Costa Rica, they did not run across the border. Guess what they did? They went to the U.S. Embassy in Costa Rica, San Jose, Costa Rica. They filled out visa applications, and when they got the visas in their passports, then they came to America. And that's all we ask of these people. Fill out the paperwork, wait for your visas, then you can come to America like my mother and father did.
Closing on Trump here, Deroy, is this pretty much a put up or shut up moment for him? I mean, he's drawn a pretty clear line in the sand, not only in his Oval Office negotiations with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, but when he grudgingly signed the massive spending bill earlier this year, he said, I'm not doing this again, especially if I don't get the wall funding. So if he can't get what he wants in the regular funding bill, and he can't get it through leverage, I know he's trying to look through the couch cushions and all these different executive offices for $5 billion if Congress won't give it to him. But what does he have to achieve here in order to show that he's making good on his word?
Well, I think the bare minimum he's got to do is get $1.6 billion. I mean, I think he should get $5 billion. He should get $25 billion. But he's got to get something. He's got to get something. And just doing a continuing resolution without any wall money basically is a broken promise. And look, if he vetoes this thing and he gets his veto overridden, he can say, look, I tried. He needs to give Republicans and conservatives, including everybody, left, middle, and right in this country, the sense that he worked for this and pushed for this as hard as he could. He needs to whip Republicans. He needs to get the Republicans to do their jobs. Look, we currently control the House and the Senate. Next year it's going to be the Senate only and barely, although the numbers will increase. The leadership there is just not as strong as it should be. And he ought to tell these people, look, you get to go home for Christmas Day. Other than that, you guys are going to vote and vote and vote and vote until January 3. And there are multiple proposals. Ted Cruz has a great idea, which is to pay for the wall through money we've seized from Mexican drug cartels. I don't know if that adds up to $5 billion. It probably adds up to $1 billion. And let's put that money to use that way. And let the Democrats vote against taking drug cartel money and using it for the wall. Put these things on the floor, make them vote. And it's very easy for Democrats to say, oh, well, we oppose this, we don't like this idea. But if they actually have to put it to a vote and have their names next to these things, some of them might actually buckle and say, well, I don't want to have that as a campaign issue used against me in 2020 or 2022, whenever it is. And they might actually vote the right way. So they ought to vote on these things and at least at a minimum make the Democrats feel the fire of having to go on the Senate floor, go on the House floor, and take these difficult votes. The worst thing you can do is when they say, well, we don't support this, and the Republicans just say, okay, well, never mind. We won't even bring it up. We won't even make you vote. At a bare minimum, make these people vote. That's why they were elected. Make them do their jobs.
We'll be watching. I know you will as well. Deroy, thanks for being with us. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Greg. Thanks very much.
Deroy Murdock, syndicated columnist. You can find most of his writings, if not all of them, actually, at National Review Online. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.